I have like short questions about your movie. I watched it yesterday, and
Sure.
I was like, at first it was really interesting because I thought it's completely about only about legend, but eventually I realized that it's like real life story, uh,
Yeah.
like showing this example of the legend. It's amazing how you demonstrated it. So I have a couple of questions about like the whole idea and what you did. Um, Tell me, please, like, do you think your movie is capable to fight the uh, like walls and stereotypes of the society?
So here's a very interesting thing. I before when I joined film and storytelling and stuff, I was with this huge optimistic attitude that films and art can change the world. Like it's gonna change the world. You just gotta do it and all of that and yada yada yada. However, I realize it's putting too much pressure on the art itself. However, so I'll give you a very interesting example about Shikhandi as well. Now, this is where I feel that change is possible, because not possibly after the film is made, and how it's received and what people take out of it and all, that is all great, but that's not in my control as a maker. What was in my control is who I cast, whose stories I decided to tell, who I decided to have on my crew. And so Shikhandi was a very interesting experience in that sense, where we got people from the transgender community to play characters that are trans in the film. And this was a very interesting anecdote that happened with us during the shoot. So I think it was the third day of the shoot and stuff. And filmmaking is such a communal thing where you're in this high pressure environment for few days, where you're in each other's spaces, you're in each other's faces and all of that, and you're just sharing stories and you're sharing food and stuff. So there was this one day when we broke for lunch, and we had people from all sorts of backgrounds who were part of the crew, and we were just having lunch together. And we were with our actors who are from the community and stuff, and it was an environment where they felt safe to share their stories of life and way that come from what their struggles have been, what their pronouns are, how they're addressed in the community and stuff. And so that happened. That was a beautiful thing in itself. What was so important was what followed after the shoot. One of the crew members, we were just having a conversation, and he just turns to me and says, "You know what? I actually didn't know this about the community." And that's when I thought that this entire effort, I don't know if it's an effort, but this entire idea of expressing yourself through stories, is quite powerful in this sense, where you're touching one life at a time. You're changing one perception at a time. And this is through the process of making the film and not necessarily what happens after the film is out there. So that was very interesting. And that like puts in back the hope in me that possibly films and art can change the society, but not necessarily the finished product, but the process of getting there, especially in film.
It's really cool. I actually didn't think about it, but like honestly, you gathered all people in one place, all people like in the same
Yeah.
interests where they could share and feel secure and get to know more about like the things they want to do, the things they are comfortable to do, and like unite and then maybe meet together again and enjoy their like common interest. It's cool. I mean, it's great.
It's so powerful, isn't it? Like, because you're just being human, you're just being yourselves, right? And you need a space for that. And once that happens, it's a very powerful thing, because humans are inherent storytellers. Like, even when we're meeting and stuff, we're just sharing stories, we're just sharing ideas and stuff, which is what defines us as humans, be it from whatever community you are. So that was very powerful, just to be able to tap into that.
You feel much more stronger when you hear people on the same page with you, and it's really important to know what you're saying, understand you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's quite, I mean, that's why when we're creating stuff with collaboration and stuff, the most difficult thing to do is to actually find a team who are on the same page with you. And once you have that, you're gold.
So how was the process of finding the team? How did you find the team?
So basically, so this was a film school project where I'd come in to direct. And so they were very specific in terms of the crew. It was very important that we got people who are on the same page, who are passionate about telling a story about the community. So in terms of that, we spoke to people. I basically wanted people who are just, for me, what's very important is you don't have to be so great at your craft as long as you're a good human, right? Like, because you'll be able to understand cinema so much more deeply and more profound despite you not having the knowledge of it, because you're in it with one significant thing, which is just feeling, which trumps everything. So that was in terms of the crew. And in terms of the cast, the one thing when I started conceiving this idea and this story, the priority for me was that it is a story of the transgender community in India, and it has to be authentically cast. Like, there is no way. We have to have people from the community telling their story because it is their story. And so I got in touch with organizations who work with the trans community over here, and just being able to speak to people, just being able to understand where they're coming from. And so that was my process of getting my people who know this space, who have a lived in experience, because eventually we're trying to make something that imitates life. We are not just cooking something up from our own imagination. So it was important for people to know this story. It was important for people to have experienced this, because it is a reflection of that experience, that collective experience that I eventually wanted to portray on screen, however way I thought was okay. So in terms of that, yeah, like, we got some amazing responses from people, because it's very rare that people from the community get cast to be played parts that are of the community. And that was very important. So it wasn't actually that difficult as people portray it. In fact, it was quite the contrary. It was quite simple to get people, because everyone is so hungry, actors, performers, people are just so hungry to be able to share their voice and be authentic and just express in this particular medium. So that's how we really went about it. If I had to break it down in a shorter answer, it would be like just people who are really passionate and excited about telling the story.
Yeah, it's cool. It's interesting
Yeah.
experience when you engage.
Yeah.
No, and I'm absolutely agree with you that you need to engage people from the society, because they need to speak, they want to speak, and they need the space to speak. But you did a good thing. What do you think, if the participation of the festival would help you to raise the awareness of this topic and promote inclusivity around the world in India?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you think the participation in the festival will help you to raise the awareness about this topic and promote inclusivity around the world, in India maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, India, despite it being what it is, like, it's a very gate kept society by the most privilege of caste, of class, of so many complex things that are there. However, there are people also who are doing work that defies that system, right? And the people I had in the film were part of that movement. Like, our actor who plays Guruji, she aided in the fight for a trans act in India, which is called the Nalsa Judgment, to be able to put it out there for the basic rights of trans people. So that's in terms of that. In terms of how the festival helps, it is, so there's this very interesting thing. Like, I love this filmmaker called Ava DuVernay, and she made this insane series called When They See Us, and it was such a powerful piece of work, and it just connected so deeply with me because more than anything else, more than the content of it, it was what she intended to do with the story. And she says this one very important thing: more than anything else, what mattered to her was how the story was told in the eyes of the five. And I come back to that, where the impact, the power, the change in society, they're too abstract of topics to be able to handle by one small film, right? It may shift a thought process, which is wonderful, which is after I've made the film. So I'll come back to it. I'll come back to what I said sometime in the beginning, where the power and the impact of the festival being able to take up a story like this is on the people who've worked on the story and what they can go out in society and have this baggage behind them in a good way. Like, see, I have told our story. This is where it's reached. I need a platform because I have the power and I've done it and it's reached here. So that's how I feel there's tangible change in that sense, where it'll empower people from our cast, from our community, from our crew, to be able to go out there, knock onto doors who are creating content. They'll be like, here, we have something over here. It has been accredited by festivals and stuff. Our voice is validated. So you need to give us more work. And so I see the change in that perspective. The others, in terms of changing perceptions and stuff, I think it can happen, but I don't know if it does because I'm unable to measure it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
How do you imagine the story of the boy later, after the last moment of the movie?
How do I imagine it?
Yeah, what's gonna be later? What is his future?
So this is that's so interesting. I have not thought about it, but I do have a vague idea of what it is, because eventually, so if you see, the entire treatment of the film is very classic Indian cinema treatment, where there's song, where there's music. And there are cinematic tropes that have been used and abused so many times in films. However, what all of these have created the fabric of cinema. However, we haven't seen these tropes that emotionally work powerfully. We haven't seen these tropes being used to tell a queer story. And so normally in a great love story, we would have sort of a happy ending where it's an idealistic world to be able to live in. And so for me, if I'm to take that idea or that process with which I wanted to make this film, which is full of music, full of color, full of emotions, full of, I don't know about, full of emotions, full of just a lot of pomp, something that we've seen all across the world for generations, but not in a queer story. And for me, what happens with her eventually by the end of the film, she lives a happy life, which is extremely idealistic, but it's hopeful. It what gives me hope. And that is in the fabric of the film. If we're to break this down in the fabric of reality, it would be completely different, because we're still tackling these battles every single minute of our lives as a community, as a society. So yeah, I hope that answers.
It could be the idea for the next short movie of the next year. So
let's see. Right.
okay, for me, that's it, I guess. I asked you all the questions. If you want, you can ask me the question if there are one, and we can finish the interview. It was a pleasure to meet you. Actually, you're really sunny, kind person, and it's cool to see the director of the movie like in front of my eyes. It's cool. Thank you.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's so sweet. I had a question for you.
Sure.
It was more than a question. It was just a discussion and stuff. So I was very skeptical about the mythological aspect of the film because it's very inherently Indian, right? And even when I was putting it in the film, I was really skeptical about the fact that would people who do not belong to this particular country, would they still follow? And would they still be able to experience the emotions that I did while I was introduced to the text of it? So I wanted to ask you, how was the mythological aspect of it for you in the film?
I saw quite like some of the movies of the festival, and all of them were like cultural. All they were representing the culture and the main issues of the society of their particular region. And I want to tell you that your movie is completely clear, so you're not getting confused with the story and mythology of the India, because it's clear how it started and it's clear how it's interpreted to the real story. So for me it was interesting, and actually I think it's a great idea to compare it. And I also had a question of you, like, is it a real mythology or you created it? Or because if it's real, it's amazing. I mean,
yeah. So I personally so you've heard of the Mahabharata?
From your movie.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, this is a bit of a longer discussion. I mean, but we can still have it just to have it across. So the stories and traditions and many religious practices in India have arrived from two of the longest poems in the world. One is the Ramayana and one is the Mahabharata, where these are incarnations of gods and goddesses to incorporate righteousness, to be able to incorporate archetypes and how one should live about their life. So I am very excited about this entire idea. Like, you know how essentially Greek mythology exists, right? So in terms of their gods, their goddesses, and they have their entire mythology and stuff. It's the same thing with India, with these two mythological stories. So in terms of that, so this text is in existence for centuries. And these are extremely detailed tellings, and people have retold them, and the ideas have changed and stuff, which is what I feel mythology needs to do. It can't be gate kept by a certain group of people, because that's ideally a problem that we do face. Like, it is gate kept by a certain community where it's just their particular agenda that they drive across. However, these texts are so rich in terms of literature that you're able to pick up characters and explore them because they have their entire story arcs. They have their entire archetypes. And Shikhandi is one of those characters from the Mahabharata. And so that's when I picked it. I was like, because mythology lends itself to retellings, because every generation context changes. The fabric of society keeps changing every day. And it is then where mythology as a whole in any part of the world, if you see, it needs to evolve, because these stories are passed down from generations, right? And so I personally would like to give in my perspective with the situations that are around me and retell it and reinterpret it, and then give it to the next generation, hopefully. And then they will take it, and then it evolves and stuff. Because it's essentially that mythology gives you a place and a story and archetypes to be able to do that. And so, no, it's not an original story. I haven't created it. This has been in existence for centuries, and I've just picked it up, retold it the way I feel connects to me and the experiences around me in society, and I've put it out there.
I think it's very powerful, because people read these stories and mythology like all the time, and they trust in it. They take it as a granted that that's a book or a story that they should rely on, they should read, and they should respect it. And when you find things where you can prove your position on the things that are actually normal, that can be
Yeah.
interpreted in the society. You find it in the same book that people read, but they just like skipped it somehow or missed it. And you find it,
Yeah.
you see it's here. It was here all the
Yeah.
time. You should read
It's
it
been in
carefully.
existence forever.
Yeah.
Like, just take a look at it again. Like, that is the beautiful thing, right? Like, probably the generation of my parents wouldn't see these particular aspects because the problems they faced were very different. And then they would find that in that particular text because their context, their environment, their situation was different. However, a generation later, I am in the same place, I'm picking up the same text, but the society around me has changed so much, it's evolved so much for the better and the worse, that now I look at the mythological text with that perspective of my experiences of today. And it just keeps evolving, which is a very powerful thing.
It's true.
So, yeah.
Agree
Yeah.
with you. It should be everything like
Yes.
that. And I'm happy that there are people like you who are not afraid to share and who are not afraid to speak up. And it's cool. You have our support, the support of the festival. And it was like a pleasure to meet you and talk to you like
Same here.
personally. Thank you for the
Thank
interview.
you. No worries. Thank you. I had so much fun. This was such a lovely conversation.
Thanks.